The night air in the hospital corridor was thick with the sharp smell of antiseptic and something heavier beneath, old pain, maybe, or a long history held in the white tiles and grey walls. The clock above the nurse's station burned 2:17 in pale green. My mother's voice carried sharp in the hush. That's how arguments sounded with us, like wounds reopening. "We are not talking about this again, Marcos," she said, arms folded tight against her chest, fine lines deepening at her mouth. She stared out the window as if she could will the world to rearrange. I shifted my weight, boots scuffing against blue linoleum. My father slouched further against the painted concrete. He had just had a minor heart attack, less dramatic than some, enough to bring us all together anyway, crowding the corridor with worry and old resentments. "I have a shift at the pharmacy in 4 hours," my sister Lucia said, her arms wrapped around herself. "Why don't we wait until—" But my mother cut her off. "This is not the time for foolishness. Marcos can talk about his stories tomorrow with his friends in the bar, not in the hospital." I forced myself to meet her gaze, heart shivering but jaw set. "I'm not going to medical school." "I told you." She shook her head, a tired, well-rehearsed motion. "So what, you want to write your little tailies, sell them from a kiosk in Constitucion? People starve with better plans." "They're not little tailies." Lucia held up her hands before I could finish. Her eyes, as always, glittered with that mix of exhaustion and pity reserved for a sibling who refuses to act reasonably. "Marcos," she said softly, "we are just worried about you." "We are tired," my father said quietly. He never raised his voice, only let disappointment pool in the gaps of his silences. I looked at his pale wrist, his hospital band, the veins under thin skin. Maybe I should have left it, swallowed the urge, but nerves lit up with something stubborn, steel where there was supposed to be softness. "I don't want what you want for me. I want to write, I always have." My mother let out a humorless laugh. "And what next? You'll become famous and forget us. You'll live like Borges in that big old house and be miserable forever." A nurse bustled by and hesitated, her eyes darting to our tight knot of family drama. I forced my voice lower. "I don't know what I'll be, I just know it's this or nothing." The silence that followed settled rough, like grit in a wound, and then my mother sighed, the sound thinner than before. "You will understand someday when life teaches you, maybe not tonight." Her words pinned themselves to me, heavy and cold, as I slipped from the hallway and out into the city. My phone buzzed with messages from friends inviting me to bars, but I ignored them and walked under the trembling yellow streetlights, each footstep echoing my mother's laughter. "Foolishness, little tailies, you will understand." There was nothing cinematic about struggle. The movies lie, it's not noble or beautiful. Mostly it's tedium and bitterness, a slow grind through long nights and empty pockets. I rented a room in Caballito above a butcher's shop. I bought instant coffee and cheap pens. I found cafe tables with cracked formica where I could work until they flicked the lights at closing time. It had felt brave at 18, facing my parents and insisting I'd be a novelist. At 22, the world seemed so big it might swallow me before it even noticed I was there. I worked the cash register in an all-night kiosk on Avenida Corrientes. I collected stories no one asked for, from insomniacs and lovers and street sweepers. I scribbled in a battered notebook on my breaks, hands stiff with cold in Buenos Aires winters. "Still writing, Chico?" Diego, my roommate, asked once. He was in medical school himself, back straight, hair always tidy. "You could come to lectures with me, see if it suits you." I smiled. "That's your path, Diguito." "I've got mines." He shrugged, friendly but distant, and I envied the calm confidence in his movements. Years ticked by on my notebooks. I entered short story contests and lost. Then once I won third place for a story about a Gloria's fan sneaking into the Bombonera to ask for forgiveness from his dead wife. It was published in a local literary magazine that folded soon after. My mother called when she heard. "I saw your name. Congratulations, Hijo," she said, voice tight with confusion. I heard Lucia's laughter in the background, a sound that might have been support or disbelief. Mostly I worked in quiet, I wrote in deep loneliness. At times I hated my own words, pages filled with crossed-out paragraphs, coffee stains on everything. Sometimes the city seemed to conspire against me, a typewriter stolen from my bag in the subway, a hard drive lost in a power surge, rent due with only coins to offer. I waited tables. I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. Every week I sent stories to editors who replied with kind rejections. "We enjoyed your submission, but..." One July night rain slicked the pavement, painting everything in shimmering silver. My mother called to ask for help with my father's chemo appointments. I skipped work to take him, sitting with him in waiting rooms as he dozed beneath the fluorescent buzz. You still doing your writing? He asked quietly, flipping a dog-eared magazine. I am. He didn't look up. Don't let them talk you out of it if you still want it. I glanced over, surprised. He didn't meet my eyes. He had never understood the desire, but maybe he understood the hunger, his own dreams, shelved for years beneath quiet sacrifices. Maybe that was all a father ever wants. I kept writing. The stories grew longer. By 26, I had finished a novel, thin, awkward, uneven. I sent it everywhere, and everywhere it was rejected. Still, a certain stubbornness, tenderness twisted with steel, kept me afloat. I read the rejection letters aloud to myself, then wrote anyway. Around me, everyone seemed to move on. Lucia promoted to store manager, Diego engaged. My mother's hair grayed. My father's walks grew shorter. It wasn't cinematic. But it was real. I found the new story one morning like a bruise in my chest. It was about loss, about a boy whose voice echoes through an abandoned train station outside Villa Crespo, dreaming aloud to anyone who still believes in second chances. I wrote it in a heat 8 feverish months. I sent it to an independent press in San Telmo out of habit with no real hope. I spent the next weeks haunting my email, half dreading, half praying for a reply, and one came. We would be honored to publish your manuscript, Marcos, the email read. Your words haunted us. I sat at the small table in my apartment, staring at the screen, unable to move. At first, nothing changed. I still worked night shifts, pinched coins for groceries. The advance covered 3 months of rent. The novel was only released in a small print run, but something happened. A columnist from La Nación wrote a review. The story, haunting, honest, unflinching, caught notice. Readers found me. The book sold out, then sold again. I was invited to speak at the Feria del Libro, where I signed copies for hours, hands cramping, a line of strangers clutching the life I'd imagined into being. My mother sent a message. Saw you in the paper. You look thin. Eat something. I replied, will do, mamas. A literary agent called. International rights. Interviews with radio hosts who finally asked about the struggle it took to write instead of just the wins. Suddenly the world's gaze was gentle, admiring. The first time I sat across from a room packed with readers, all looking to me, not with mockery or skepticism, but with the expectation of something quietly profound, I trembled inside. All the old words, foolishness, little tailies, you will understand, sometimes still echoed, but they didn't rule me. I knew I would have to go home eventually. When my second novel was nominated for a national award, the local press arranged an event in Park Chacabuco, a reading, a signing. My publicist suggested an invitation, bring your family, they'll be proud. Pride. That word tasted strange after so many years, but I called my mother anyway, awkwardly. I have something in Buenos Aires, I said, on Friday afternoon. She hesitated. Work, Lucia too. Your father has a doctor's visit. It would mean a lot, I tried. Just there will be food and some speeches, that's all. In the end, she relented. We'll try, don't expect much. That morning, nerves gnawed at me. I ironed my one good shirt, hands shaking. Rain drummed on the windows as the city stuttered to life, car horns echoing through the drizzle. At noon, I took a cab past the old butcher shop, now closed, and watched as familiar blocks rolled past, San Jose, Medrano, each corner filled with memories. The library hall shone brightly, full of people holding my book, whispering. I took my place at the long table next to journalists I'd only known through bylines. As I waited, I scanned the door, barely breathing. At 3:30, my family arrived. My mother in her old brown coat, clutching her purse, Lucia in a scarf, unsmiling but there, my father leaning heavily on his cane. They paused in the doorway, blinking, uncertain. I could see them reading the banners, the posters with my face and the book's blue cover. I caught my mother's eye, tried to smile. The event began. The host spoke of my work, quoting lines I'd written late at night, lines I'd thought no one would ever care about. I read an excerpt, hands trembling where the paper shook. My father's face was unreadable, my mother's lips parted, a shaky exhale. Lucia stared at the floor. There were questions afterward about inspiration, about sacrifice. I answered as best I could, my voice steadier than I thought it might be. Then the moment I'd feared, the proof. The journalist from La Nación stood. Your book is being translated, yes, sold in 5 countries. It said you are one of the most promising voices in Buenos Aires literature. Did you always believe this would happen? For a second the room was quiet, the city's old doubt pressing in. I looked over at my family, my mother clutching the novel, thumb tracing the embossed letters of my name. No, I said, I doubted almost every step, but I kept going anyway. Sometimes that's all you can do, walk through the doubt. There was applause, cameras flickered. In the commotion, my mother stood, blinking as if waking from a dream, and approached the table. The room watched her, not me. Her usual certainty flickered, replaced by something raw. She placed the book before her, fingers trembling. She looked at me, not past me, not through me, but really at me, for the first time in years. You did it, she whispered, voice thin. Around us, everyone stared, but she didn't care. Her hands were cold in mine, but they squeezed strong. My father hovered behind, smiling with a kind of private pride. Lucia wiped at her eye with the corner of her scarf, pretending it was just the dust. A journalist snapped a photo, a mother and son, hands clasped, the proof of everything between them. The old wounds, the old faith, the trembling steel beneath tenderness. The event wound down. My family lingered in the lobby, surrounded by people congratulating me. My mother leaned close. You know, your grandmother would have hated seeing your face on a poster. I laughed, nerves unraveling. She hated everything modern. Lucia grinned, shy. Can I have a signed copy, or is that only for strangers? I took the book she offered, scrawled my name and wrote. For Lucia, who always made me laugh even when I wanted to quit. Behind us the city's evening pressed in, the air sweet with winter's promise. My family found me in the crowd, a little older, a little softer. The old wounds didn't close all at once, but the ache faded in their presence. As we stepped outside, lights flickering along Avenida Assemblia, my mother slipped her arm through mine. Let's get something to eat, she said. You can tell us about your next ridiculous dream. For the first time, I didn't flinch at the word. All around us, Buenos Aires breathed, vast and indifferent, but for one moment I was home.